Alright, what is going on, guys? It is XLT here, bringing you back another video on my channel. And now this is going to be my fourth or fifth upload in the last few days. Obviously, yesterday I didn't really upload a video. It was just a screenshot of who I think was going to win the Super Bowl and my score prediction and stuff like that. But sorry I didn't get a full video out. I was just busy during the day doing homework, preparing and stuff like that. So sorry I didn't get a video out, but you guys did get to see my prediction. I predicted the Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl, and they did, but I didn't predict the score right. I don't think anybody saw that this game was going to be this high scoring. Maybe a few people did, but usually, typically, Super Bowls aren't, the most high scoring game that we see all year. But that game had the most yards, I think, of any playoff game in NFL history, or any Super Bowl game in NFL history. And if I'm not mistaken, it had more total yards than any other game in NFL history. But don't quote me on that last part. I'm not entirely sure about that. But like I said, it was a very, very good game. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it, because I know I enjoyed myself watching it. I'm a Tom Brady fan. I like what he does, but I just couldn't root for him in this one. I knew the Eagles had a lot to prove, and I knew that they had a story behind it. Losing your starting franchise quarterback, MVP caliber player to, injury late in the season is very detrimental. But having a guy like Nick Foles come and step up and take his place, and against Atlanta, everybody was like, oh my gosh, they're not going to be able to do it. They can't do it with Nick Foles. And then that game against Minnesota, everybody was like, all right, now this guy's like the real deal. He's for real about this. He's not a bad player. He's really, really good at what he does, and he proved that in this Super Bowl, throwing for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, and also catching a touchdown, which is a big, big turning point in the game. And we're just going to go over today in this video my reaction and my thoughts to the Super Bowl. I've got some points up on the screen that I really want to talk about, so let's get right into that. My first point, like I've been saying, was about Nick Foles and how great he played. Obviously, he was outdueled by Tom Brady. If you just look at the stats, Tom Brady had the most passing yards in a Super Bowl history, breaking his own record, which he held, I think, a couple years ago, either the last Super Bowl that he played in or the one against the Seahawks. I'm not sure which one he had more yards in, but he broke his own record. He set a Super Bowl record. He also had 4 touchdowns. That's one of the best passing performances I've ever seen a quarterback put on, and to have him lose that game with that type of performance is just crazy. But Nick Foles really stepped up to the plate and played a very, very good game, and I thought that he was very deserving of the MVP award. A guy that went kind of unsung on that Eagles team was Malcolm Jenkins. I thought he played a great game. He virtually shut down James White in the passing game and made him a non-factor, which was kind of hard because that's one of Brady's, favorite targets among Gronk and Amendola and Hogan. James White is up there with those guys in terms of targets and receptions and stuff like that. So taking him away was a very, very crucial part of why the Eagles won that game. The Patriots played very, very well. Tom Brady obviously had the best passing performance in Super Bowl history and probably in his history of being a quarterback, but their defense was just not up to snuff. They did not play a very good game. Obviously, they gave up 41 points, which I don't think is a Super Bowl record. I think the Broncos defense a few years ago gave up like 46 or something like that, but still, you can't expect to give up 40. You can't give up 40 points and then expect to win a freaking Super Bowl. Like, that's just ridiculous. So that's probably going to be their biggest need going into the offseason. Obviously, is secondary help and D-line help, especially among the edge. I think their interior guys with Trey Flowers is pretty good, and Malcolm Brown is very, very good, and I thought that he played a good game too, especially going up against the best center in the NFL in Jason Kelce. Talking about defenses a little bit, I thought that they were both absolutely terrible. There were some good plays that both teams made, but there was just no secondary help on either side of the ball for either team. The Eagles secondary, we knew it was their weakness, and it showed. Obviously, giving up 505 passing yards, and obviously the Patriots did the same, but not as bad. They only gave up like 350, but still, you can't expect to give up those numbers and win. But the Eagles had a very, very good run game, and they pretty much shut down the run game essentially for the Patriots, which I think helped them a little bit because it made the Patriots virtually one-dimensional in the last 4 minutes of the game, and that's really where the defense for the Eagles stepped up and made some plays. I think that late play by Brandon Graham was one of the more clutch plays we've ever seen in Super Bowl history. I'm obviously going to get, like, Jake Elliott did a great job in that game making that late field goal, but he's not making that field goal if Brandon Graham doesn't get to Tom Brady and make him fumble the ball. That is probably up there with the Malcolm Butler play and the David Tyree play of the most clutch plays we've seen in the last 5-10 years. And Malcolm Butler and Brandon Graham, those two plays are kind of up there. If Brandon Graham doesn't make that play, then I think the Patriots are going down there and they're probably scoring and maybe winning that game. But because you know how Tom Brady gets in late game situations, he just turns it on and he's a totally different animal. But that's great to see Brandon Graham, a Michigan boy. I was rooting for him. I've been a fan of his for a while since he got drafted. I thought that he was a great draft pick, and he's developed over the years, and he's turned into one of the NFL's best defensive ends. So it's great to see him come out of Michigan and make a play on another Michigan alum, Tom Brady, who's, you know, one of the greatest to ever do it. You know, making a play on that guy in that type of a game just, you know, symbolizes how far he's come and how much he's developed since his time in the NFL. And like I said, there was another quarterback in that game. I'm not just talking about Tom Brady this whole time. Nick Foles catching that touchdown probably was one of the bigger turning points of the entire game. Obviously, the Patriots tried it earlier with Tom, and they didn't execute it very well. I mean, it was pretty well executed, but Tom just let it slip out of his hands, and, you know, that kind of came back to bite him because I think they had to kick a field goal. I'm not sure if that's the drive where they missed the field goal or if they ended up just I think that is the drive that they missed the field goal, because then the Eagles went down and scored a touchdown, and it was 10-7. But, you know, that play could have been a big turning point. They could have gone down and taken the momentum off that play and went down and scored, and, you know, that could have changed the whole dynamic of the game, but they didn't. And then Nick Foles catching the touchdown, going into halftime to take a 10-point lead. I think it was 22-12 at half. Taking a 10-point lead at halftime was a very, very big turning point for the Eagles. It gave them a lot of momentum, and I think it helped them, you know, really rally around and say, okay, you know what, this is real. Like, we're up 10 points on the defending champions, arguably the best team in the NFL besides us. You know, they really thought that they could do it. Also, there were no breaks on the Eagles' offensive train, and I think it's ultimately why they won the game. Obviously, Brandon Graham had that outstanding play like I just talked about, but we saw last year why the Falcons lost the game, and it was because they were just handing it off 3 downs or handing it off 2 downs per drive or per series, and then just throwing it and getting an incompletion and eventually stopping the clock and then having to punt the ball away. And it was kind of Matt Ryan's fault, kind of the defense's fault for not holding up, but eventually, or yeah, I guess eventually is the good word to use, but eventually that's why they ended up losing the game, is because they just could not move the ball on offense, and they became stagnant because they played not to win. They played not to lose. I don't know what exactly the term is. I'm just thinking about it, but they didn't play aggressive at all. The Falcons did last year. They didn't play aggressive at all. They weren't taking shots. They weren't giving their best playmaker the ball, which would be Julio Jones. They weren't really, you know, putting their players in good situations to make for them to make plays and for them to add on to their score. Because I think if they would have scored maybe 1 or 2 more touchdowns, I mean, they were already up 25. I don't get how you blow a 25-point lead, but if they'd have scored a couple more times, the game's probably over. Like, I don't think Tom Brady could have come back from like 35, but, you know, we're talking about this year's Super Bowl. But I think Doug Peterson's play calling and their aggressiveness on the offensive side of the ball, I think, is a big reason of why they won, because he came into the game, he's like, look, I'm pulling out all the tricks, I'm going to be aggressive, and I'm going to go win this game, because that's how you win a game, is by being aggressive on offense. Another thing that kind of helped the Eagles that was the Patriots' fault is that Malcolm Butler was not playing that entire game except on special teams. He only played on kickoff and kick return and like punt return and stuff like that. And I think that is why, that's not why, but that's a big reason of why I think the Eagles had success, because instead of sticking Malcolm Butler on guys like Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar, they were sticking Eric Rowe, who was a second-round pick by the Eagles, I think 3 years ago when Chip Kelly was the head coach, 3 or 4 years ago, and he was not a good pick. When they picked him, I was like, what the heck, why are they picking him? But Chip Kelly was just like, oh, I'm only going to pick guys from the Pac-12, because that makes sense, because I played against them, but he's an idiot. That's nevertheless. Them not playing Malcolm Butler, Bill Belichick said that he's playing the players that he thought gave them the best chance to win the game, when Eric Rowe just gets absolutely exposed the entire game, and Malcolm Butler's over there sitting on the sidelines fully healthy and ready to go. I don't think he had any injuries. There wasn't any injury report. Their only injury report before the game was Gronk with the concussion, but he got cleared to play. Well, we'll never know if he was 100% or not, but, you know, he wasn't going to miss that game to save his life. But another injury that happened was the Brandon Cooks hit. The hit that he took from, I think that was Rodney McLeod, that was a huge hit, and I think that changed a lot of what was going to happen in the game, because Brandon Cooks was Tom Brady's pretty much only deep threat. I mean, Amendola and Hogan don't have 4.33 speed, so they're not going to be able to burn anybody, and Gronk is just a big guy, so if you can get him open down the field, then great, but if you can't, then, you know, you kind of don't have a deep threat. And I mean, although it didn't, what was Tom Brady going to pass for 555 yards instead of 505? I mean, I think he still would have had a great game, but I think that they probably could have gotten touchdowns instead of field goals on some drives because of Brandon Cooks' ability to stretch the field and get downfield and just be more effective in terms of deep passes and stuff like that. And a couple questions that this whole game rises are, what is Nick Foles' value now? What is his value in terms of other teams around the NFL? You know, he showed in the playoffs that he can perform, and obviously against the Vikings he had like 360 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then which was the best defense in the NFL, obviously putting up those numbers against the best defense in the NFL is a very good thing, and it shows other teams that you're capable. And also you know, put up a huge game in the Super Bowl, and you showed that you could be a leader and that you could control a team and that you could win the biggest game of the entire year and be the MVP of that game. You know, where does that rank him in terms of free agent quarterbacks now? I think obviously Kirk Cousins is still the #1, but you know, what does this do to his value? Because I don't think the Eagles want to keep him, because I think he's obviously, I think he's 29 or 30. He's older than 27, I know that much, but he's, you know, not getting any younger. And I think I don't think the Eagles, but I know the Eagles have a franchise quarterback in Carson Wentz, and they trust him a lot, and Nick Foles is just going to be a backup the entire time he sticks in Philly, and maybe he wants to go out and pursue another you know, a later career push in a different city, much like Rich Gannon did when he went to Oakland. Maybe he'll end up with the Browns, or he'll end up with the Broncos, or he'll end up with the Jets. I think he probably would end up with the Jets, but I could see the Browns and the Broncos throwing offers at him, although the Jets seem like the higher contender, because I think the Broncos are going to try and pursue Kirk Cousins very heavily, and I think that the Browns, if they don't land Kirk Cousins, they might go after Nick Foles. Another player that we could talk about that is a free agent that, you know, may or may not be on the team he played in the game last night. Next year, that was a kind of messed up sentence, but Malcolm Butler, you know, he got sat last night. He didn't play the entire Super Bowl. I mean, arguably the best player in your secondary didn't play the entire game, which is the most important game of the year. That's a kind of a big question mark. Maybe it's team issues, character issues. I'm not sure what it was. Nobody has really made a report yet, but Bill Belichick pretty much said, "Oh, we're going to put the players out there that give us the best ability to win." You know, in his that was probably a terrible impersonation, but in his voice, you know how he does it. Where does he end up? Because I don't think he wants to sign back there. You know, if I was in the Super Bowl and I was arguably a team's best defender, and they just sat me, I'm not going to play for that team next year. Like, you've got me messed up if you're thinking that I'm going to sign a contract to be loyal to a guy who sat me in the biggest game of the year. Like, that doesn't make sense in my mind why he would stick there. So he's going to be a free agent. A lot of teams are going to be interested in him. A number of teams that I think could approach him and try and get him to play for them are the Chiefs, because they need big-time secondary help. Although they just got Kendall Fuller, I think that they could throw a contract at him. The 49ers would be a team that would be looking to sign a cornerback, because they're not very deep in that position. The Eagles, the team that you just played against, they're young at cornerback, but I think they could use some veteran leadership. A team like the Dolphins comes to mind. They're in desperate need of secondary help. They signed Byron Maxwell, for crying out loud, one of the fastest fallers in terms of talent in the NFL. Like, he was top 10 cornerback caliber like 4 or 5 years ago. Not 4 or 5, but like 3-4 years ago. And over the last 2-3 seasons, he's absolutely just fallen off the face of the earth. But, you know, there's going to be a lot of teams that are very interested in Malcolm Butler, and I think that, you know, I don't think he'll sign back with the Patriots. I think he'll find a way to get out of that contract, or just not sign with them, and open up his market and open up his horizons and look at teams that want to play him in big games, actually. But yeah, that's going to be it for the video, guys. Like I said, the Eagles won the Super Bowl. They're one-time Super Bowl champions. I'm glad for the city of Philadelphia. I'm glad for that football team. They really deserve it. They played the underdog role the entire year. Nobody gave them any credit, but they came through when it mattered and won the big game. I think the city of Philadelphia may or may not be underground by now, judging by how they were partying last night, but hopefully they can get that all cleaned up and situated by today. But they deserve to celebrate. They should celebrate for the entire year until until the start of the next season. But yeah, that's going to do it for me, guys. This has been XLT signing out.